And what I'd like to talk to you about right now is the new hunting regulations, which have been promulgated, if that's the right word, or certainly brought into effect under the aegis of the National Coronavirus Command Council in recent days. In the past few days, the relevant authority, excuse me while I look at my screen, the National Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries has said that hunting in South Africa precludes passing across borders. So if you're a hunter from Gauteng, you may not go on a hunting trip to the Eastern Cape, for instance. Although you can, of course, have a funeral for 50 or 500 people in the case of Zinzi Mandela. Sure, there's a bird chirping loudly outside. And you may not provide overnight accommodation, even for people traveling within the province of their residence, the province in which they reside. Now, you can imagine for yourself how this is going to wreck an industry already broken, cracked by the senseless and excessive coronavirus pandemic regulations in South Africa. For those of you who are unfamiliar with hunting, to the overwhelming extent, there are some exceptions, but to the overwhelming extent, commercial hunting in South Africa may only take place in the months of May, June, July, and August. That is the hunting season in South Africa. So hunting lodges and hunting ranches and hunting farms and just ordinary farms that depend heavily upon hunting for their annual revenue, for them to be going concerns, are being placed in the most severe jeopardy, and many of them will not make it through this year. And now I put it to you, ladies and gentlemen, that this is deliberate. Yesterday, or the day before, I held a long chat by WhatsApp with a friend of mine from Cape Town called Gary, and he spoke to me about the race course on which the squatters had begun erecting shacks, and he said he thinks it's deliberate, and I kind of not lost my temper, not that wasn't the case at all, but I got on my high horse and I said to him, Gary, yes. And I put it to you that these hunting regulations are deliberately intended to destroy that industry, because that industry is overwhelmingly dominated both from the supply side and the demand side. Probably to the extent of 99.999% by white people. Leave aside for a second the many black workers who participate, who depend. Excuse me. I just had a sandwich and I'm hiccuping. Who depend upon that industry to fill their bellies and to clothe their children, because they are not the target of the government. Moreover, not only is it to the extent of 99,999 out of 100,000, you could safely say that 99% of the hunting farms, if not more, are owned by whites. So generally you have this overwhelming participation, and then more particularly, the ownership. If you want to break an industry, if you want to break a cycle of productivity, here you are breaking something owned by particular people. I don't think for them that it's about people not being able to hunt. I think that for them it's about, for the national democratic revolution, it is about breaking the ownership structures. Not for any good, just to break. As so many other industries have been broken by the pandemic regulations. And I'd say even more than that. I don't know exactly, but I would surmise, and I'm pretty familiar with farming in South Africa, with farmers and farms. I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I've visited enough and spent enough months, even years, on farms to know, or to hazard a guess, that probably 65%, give or take 2/3, of the hunting, the commercial hunting operations in South Africa are owned and run by Afrikaners, always enemy number one of the African National Congress. So again, I put it to you, Saitlanders, that this is deliberate. No other explanation makes sense. As I said to my friend Gary, when are people going to start waking up to the very obvious? And it's, as I said, it's not about Gary. He just happens to fall into a category of people, as my beloved father does, of people who have been inclined to believe the lies that have been fed to them by the mainstream media, by the liberal elite, by the academic elite, over and over and over again over the past, say, 30 or 35, even 40 years. Because the narrative began gradually a long time ago. It's guys invade a racetrack. I think I said race course earlier, not race course, race track. Motor racing track. And the people connected to that racetrack all of a sudden believe that it's deliberate. How is it that you didn't believe it was deliberate when the Minister of Police, Begogwake forbade community farm patrols, community policing amongst farms, while allowing security services in the suburbs and the residential areas of South Africa and in the commercial and industrial areas of South Africa to continue? And then there's a sudden spike in the most vicious farm attacks. How could you not see then that maybe this stuff is deliberate, man? How could it have erupted out of nowhere immediately after the government opened the gate for them? How can you not see already for yourself that it's deliberate that they do this cigarette thing, not merely to frustrate people, but so that they can hijack the cigarette industry? And that's why Jacob Zuma's first son, Edward, not the son of Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, but the son of his first wife, Mantuli. His company's brand of cigarettes was freely available on every street corner in Johannesburg in the early stages of the lockdown. And now we know that there are enormous amounts of cigarettes coming in through the ports, coming from Korea, for instance. Can you please explain to me how it is possible for such enormous volumes to satisfy the entire South African cigarette market, which is being satisfied, by the way, can be coming through the ports of South Africa, and we're hearing nothing of enormous cigarette busts? How is that possible if it's not deliberate? If it doesn't have the connivance of people within the apparatus of state? How is it possible? And please, it's not little Zimbabwean guys running with cartons of cigarettes on their backs. It would take 100,000 Zimbabweans every hour to bring in adequate cigarettes to satisfy the entire market in South Africa. That's a nonsense, a silly explanation. These cigarettes that are coming across the borders are coming in trucks through customs and excise, through immigration. It's deliberate and it's obvious. Excuse me getting worked up and shouting. Those of you who followed our tour in the USA, where I accompanied Andre Kutsia, our national head of security, will know that for a long, long time I kept my cool in every speech, every interview, and every video that I did. I once lost my temper, and my colleague said to me, that's the way to do it. So I know it doesn't appeal to everybody, but you can't keep everybody happy. And really, I feel now that the right way to speak to you is to get worked up and to be passionate and to drive this message home. It's all deliberate. It is all being done with malice aforethought. And you must get used to that idea so that you can react and respond to it in the correct manner to safeguard the welfare of you and your loved ones in the time that lies ahead. Clearly, they intend to do you harm. And it is against that harm that you must take precautions. Thank you for listening, everybody. Have a good day, and may our Lord bless and keep you for the time that lies ahead. And